The security footage went viral for all the wrong reasons. A pregnant woman, publicly humiliated by her own husband at a charity gala. His cruel words echoing through the ballroom, "Who'd want a pregnant woman?" But what Derek Hartwell didn't know would destroy him completely. His wife, Sarah, wasn't just any abandoned expectant mother. She was hiding $53 million and an AI empire he never knew existed. And the billionaire who stepped in to rescue her, he'd been orchestrating this betrayal for months, manipulating Derek's gambling addiction, engineering his financial collapse, all to get to Sarah. This is the story of how one woman turned her greatest humiliation into her most powerful weapon. How pregnancy became her superpower, not her weakness. And how 3 men who thought they could control her learned the hardest lesson of their lives. Buckle up, because this revenge story will leave you speechless. The security camera footage would later go viral with over 50 million views. But in that moment, standing in the marble foyer of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, Sarah Mitchell felt her world collapse with a single, cruel sentence. "Who'd want a pregnant woman?" Derek Hartwell's voice cut through the charity gala's elegant chatter like a blade. Her husband of 4 years stood beneath the crystal chandelier, his arm wrapped around Jessica Vance, a 26-year-old blonde who looked like she'd stepped off an Instagram influencer's dream board. The woman wore a red dress that cost more than most people's rent, and her smile gleamed with the satisfaction of a predator who'd finally caught her prey. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her 7-month belly, protecting the life growing inside her. She wore a simple navy dress, elegant but understated, designed to accommodate her changing body without hiding it. Until this moment, she'd felt beautiful, radiant even. Now she felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly humiliated. The crowd had gone silent. Phone cameras appeared like vultures, capturing every second of her shame. Tomorrow, this moment would be dissected on social media, turned into memes, analyzed by strangers who knew nothing about her story. But what those strangers didn't know, what Derek himself had forgotten, was that Sarah Mitchell wasn't just any abandoned pregnant wife. She was the founder and secret majority shareholder of Nexus AI, a startup she'd built from her college dorm room and sold 3 years ago for $50 million. Money that Derek knew nothing about. Money she'd hidden in offshore accounts under her maiden name, following her mother's dying advice to always have an escape plan. The irony was devastating. Derek thought he was discarding damaged goods. In reality, he was throwing away the only person who'd ever loved him for who he was, not what he owned. Sarah had met Derek when she was 28, fresh off her company's acquisition, looking for someone who would love her without knowing about her wealth. She'd presented herself as a middle-class marketing coordinator, living modestly, driving a used Honda Civic while her millions sat untouched in investment accounts. Derek had seemed perfect then, confident, successful in real estate, charming at dinner parties. He owned a boutique development firm in Manhattan, specialized in luxury condos for the ultra-wealthy. He drove a Porsche, wore expensive suits, and always picked up the check. Sarah had felt safe with him, protected, loved for herself rather than her bank account. What she hadn't realized was that Derek was drowning in debt. His company was hemorrhaging money, propped up by loans from increasingly dangerous creditors. Her modest lifestyle had fooled him completely. But now that she was pregnant and less useful to his image, his true nature was emerging. The affair with Jessica had started 6 months ago, right around the time Sarah announced her pregnancy. Jessica was everything Derek thought he deserved: young, beautiful, and completely dependent on his financial support. She was also a social media strategist with 200,000 Instagram followers and an OnlyFans account Derek didn't know about. Standing in that hotel foyer, watching her husband parade his mistress like a trophy, Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. Not just her heart, though that was shattered beyond repair. Something deeper. The last vestige of the naive woman who believed love could conquer anything. Derek's eyes met hers across the room, and for a moment, she saw something flicker in his expression. Guilt, regret. Then Jessica whispered something in his ear, and his face hardened back into indifference. Seriously, Sarah, he continued, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Look at yourself. This isn't the time or place for drama. Go home. I'm moving on. And you should too. The crowd began to murmur, a mix of nervous laughter and uncomfortable silence. Sarah recognized faces from Derek's business circle, people she'd entertained in their apartment, cooked dinner for, considered friends. Now they stared at her like she was a spectacle, entertainment for their evening. But if Derek thought this public humiliation would break her, he was wrong. Standing there, feeling her daughter kick against her ribs as if in protest of her father's cruelty, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She would not run. She would not hide. And she would show Derek Hartwell exactly what kind of woman he'd just discarded. The game was about to begin, and Derek had no idea how badly he just miscalculated. The video went live at 11:47 p.m., 3 hours after the gala ended. By midnight, it had 10,000 views. By 3 a.m., it was trending on TikTok with the hashtag #PregnantWomanAbandoned. By sunrise, Sarah Mitchell's humiliation had become a global conversation about marriage, loyalty, and what society really thinks about pregnant women. But viral fame was a double-edged sword, and Derek Hartwell was about to learn that the hard way. Sarah sat in her Upper East Side apartment, the one Derek had insisted they rent because it had the right address for his clients. She'd been scrolling through comments for hours, watching strangers dissect her marriage, her appearance, her choices. Most were supportive, calling Derek a monster, sharing their own stories of abandonment and betrayal. Others were cruel, suggesting she'd let herself go, that Derek had every right to trade up. The cruelest comments, though, came from Jessica's followers. The influencer had posted her own version of events, painting herself as Derek's true love, who'd been waiting patiently for him to leave his unstable wife. According to Jessica's Instagram story, Sarah was mentally unwell, possibly dangerous, and had been using the pregnancy to trap Derek in a loveless marriage. That post had 40,000 likes and counting. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Clare Reynolds, her best friend since college and now an investigative journalist for the New York Times. Saw the video. I'm coming over. Don't do anything stupid. Claire arrived 20 minutes later with Thai takeout and a bottle of wine she immediately put back when she remembered Sarah's condition. She was a small woman with fierce eyes and the kind of determination that had earned her a Pulitzer nomination for exposing corruption in the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, Claire said, settling onto Sarah's couch. Tell me everything. And I mean everything. Starting with why you married that narcissistic piece of garbage in the first place. Sarah found herself explaining the whole story. Her hidden wealth, her mother's advice, her desire to be loved for herself. Claire listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, her journalist's mind already working. So Derek has no idea you're worth $50 million, Claire summarized. $53.7 million as of last quarter, Sarah corrected. And no, he thinks I'm broke. He's been paying all our expenses, which I thought was sweet at the time. Sweet Jesus. Sarah, do you realize what you've just handed me? Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. Derek's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, hope fluttered in her chest. Maybe he'd come to his senses. Maybe he wanted to apologize, to fix things. She answered on the third ring. Derek, what the hell did you do? His voice was ice-cold fury. That video is everywhere. My clients are calling, asking questions. This is sabotage. Sarah. Pure and simple. I didn't post anything, Sarah said quietly. Someone else recorded it. Bull, you set this up to make me look bad. Well, congratulations. You've just made this divorce a lot messier than it needed to be. Divorce. The word hit her like a physical blow. Did you think I was joking? I'm done. Sarah. Done with your neediness, your constant emotional demands, your pathetic attempts to trap me with that baby. My lawyer will be in touch. The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, feeling the last threads of her marriage dissolve into nothing. Claire took the phone from her hands. Okay, that's it. We're going to war. What do you mean? I mean, Derek just made the biggest mistake of his life. He's going after a pregnant woman with hidden assets, a viral video making him look like a monster, and a best friend who specializes in destroying powerful men who think they're untouchable. Claire's smile was predatory. Plus, I've been looking into Derek's business dealings for the past hour. Did you know his company is 3 months behind on loan payments to some very unpleasant people? Sarah's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Your husband isn't just broke, honey. He's criminally broke. He's been using investor money to fund his lifestyle. And from what I can tell, those investors aren't the patient type. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had created a GoFundMe page for her, titled Help Sarah Start Over. It already had $15,000 in donations from strangers who'd seen the video, but that wasn't the most shocking notification. The most shocking was an email from Marcus Stone, CEO of Stone Ventures, one of the most powerful venture capital firms in the country. The subject line read, "We need to talk tonight." Sarah showed Claire the email. Her friend's expression shifted from confusion to concern. Marcus Stone. Why would he contact you unless... Claire's face went pale. Sarah, what if Derek's financial problems are bigger than we thought? What if he's borrowed money from people who don't just sue when you default? Before Sarah could process that terrifying possibility, her apartment's buzzer rang. The doorman's voice crackled through the intercom. Mrs. Hartwell, there's a gentleman here to see you. It says his name is Marcus Stone. Sarah and Claire exchanged glances. They hadn't expected the conversation to happen quite this fast. Send him up, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. Whatever was coming next, she sensed it would make Derek's public humiliation look like a gentle warm-up. The real game was about to begin. Marcus Stone didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a predator who'd learned to wear expensive suits. Standing in Sarah's doorway at nearly midnight, he was tall and lean with silver-touched hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything in her apartment within seconds. His handshake was firm but not aggressive, his smile warm but somehow calculated. Claire had positioned herself protectively near the kitchen, her phone ready to record if needed. Mrs. Hartwell, Marcus said, settling into the leather chair Derek had insisted on buying. Thank you for seeing me so late. I imagine today has been difficult. It's Mitchell, Sarah corrected. I kept my maiden name professionally. And yes, it's been challenging. Of course. My apologies. His eyes flicked to her wedding ring, then to her belly. I should probably explain why I'm here. I've been watching your husband's business for some time now. Watching how, Claire interjected, her journalist instincts sharp. Marcus turned to her with interest. You must be Clare Reynolds. I read your series on pharmaceutical corruption. Impressive work. The compliment felt like a warning. He'd researched them both. Derek owes my firm money, Marcus continued. Quite a lot of money, actually. $2.3 million, to be precise. He borrowed it 18 months ago to cover what he called temporary cash flow issues. Those issues have become permanent. Sarah felt her stomach drop. I had no idea. Of course you didn't. Derek is very skilled at hiding his failures. But here's where it gets interesting. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Today's video has made your husband radioactive in business circles. His clients are fleeing. His investors are panicking. The loan he defaulted on last month, the collateral was supposed to be his company's future earnings. What does this have to do with Sarah? Claire demanded. Everything, Marcus said simply. Because Derek listed Sarah as a co-guarantor on the loan documents. Her signature is right there, witnessed and notarized. That's impossible, Sarah said. I never signed anything like that. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a document. There was her signature, perfectly forged, on a personal guarantee for Derek's debt. The notary stamp looked authentic. The date was from 6 months ago, when she'd been in the hospital for pregnancy complications. This is fraud, Claire said immediately. Proving that will take months, possibly years. Marcus replied, Meanwhile, the debt is legally enforceable. Sarah's personal assets, including any hidden accounts she might have, could be seized to satisfy the judgment. The threat hung in the air like poison. Sarah realized with growing horror that Marcus knew about her money. Somehow, this stranger had discovered what she'd hidden from her own husband. What do you want? She asked quietly. To help you, Marcus said, and his sincerity was terrifying. Derek has made himself into a problem that needs to be solved. You're collateral damage in his mess, but you don't have to be a victim. He stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline. I have resources, Sarah, legal teams, investigators, connections in the media. I could make Derek's problems disappear, protect your assets, ensure your child is born into stability rather than chaos. In exchange for what? Marcus turned back to her, and in that moment, Sarah saw past his polished exterior to something much more dangerous underneath. Partnership. Your AI expertise combined with my capital and connections, we could build something extraordinary together. Claire moved closer to Sarah. This sounds like you're taking advantage of a vulnerable woman. Does it? Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Or does it sound like I'm offering Sarah a way to turn her husband's betrayal into her greatest opportunity? Sarah's mind raced. She was 7 months pregnant, publicly humiliated, facing potential financial ruin from a debt she'd never agreed to, and now being courted by a billionaire who somehow knew her deepest secrets. Every instinct screamed danger, but what choice did she have? I need time to think, she said. Of course, but not too much time. Derek's creditors aren't known for their patience, and some of them are less civilized than I am. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Sarah. You might want to change your locks. Derek still has keys. And desperate men do desperate things. After he left, Sarah and Claire sat in stunned silence. The apartment felt smaller, more vulnerable, as if Marcus's presence had somehow contaminated the space. That man is dangerous, Claire said finally. I know, Sarah replied, but he might also be my only option. Outside, Manhattan hummed with late-night energy, oblivious to the game of chess being played 30 floors above the street. Sarah touched her belly, feeling her daughter move restlessly, as if sensing her mother's distress. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new revelations, new players in a game. Sarah was only beginning to understand, but tonight, for the first time since Derek's betrayal, she felt something besides hurt and fear. She felt the stirring of strategic thinking. The cold calculation her mother had tried to teach her before she died. The lesson Sarah had never thought she'd need sometimes to survive. You have to become the thing you fear most. A predator. Sarah woke to the sound of her apartment door opening. She'd fallen asleep on the couch after Clare left, and morning light streamed through windows she'd forgotten to close. The sound came again. Definitely a key turning in the lock. Derek appeared in her living room carrying coffee and wearing his most charming smile, the one that had fooled her for 4 years. He looked tired but determined, like a man executing a plan he'd spent all night perfecting. "Morning, beautiful," he said, as if the previous night's cruelty had never happened. "We need to talk." Sarah pulled her robe tighter around her pregnant body. "You can't just walk in here anymore. Derek, we're getting divorced, remember? That's what I want to discuss." He set the coffee on her kitchen counter and turned to face her. "I've been thinking about what happened last night, and I realize I may have overreacted." "Overreacted?" Sarah's voice was flat with disbelief. "You publicly humiliated me, told the world no one would want a pregnant woman, and then called to demand a divorce." "I was stressed. You know how important that gala was for business, and seeing you there unexpected." He moved closer, his voice taking on the soft, persuasive tone he used with difficult clients. "The thing is, Sarah, we have a problem, a big one. We don't have anything. You made that clear. My business is in trouble," Derek continued, ignoring her interruption. "I made some investments that didn't pan out, borrowed money from the wrong people. If I don't find a solution soon, we could both be in danger." Sarah thought of Marcus Stone's visit, the forged loan documents, the veiled threats. What kind of danger? Derek's mask slipped for just a moment, and she saw genuine fear in his eyes. The kind where people get hurt. Sarah. The kind where our baby gets hurt. The threat was implicit but clear. Sarah felt ice in her veins. "What do you want from me? I need you to sign some papers, transfer some assets, help me restructure the debt. It's all legal, all above board. My lawyer has everything ready." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. "Claire, don't sign anything. Stalling for time." "I need to see the documents first," Sarah said carefully. "And I want my own lawyer to review them." Derek's charm evaporated. "There's no time for that. These people want their money today, or they start taking other forms of payment." "What people? Derek, who exactly did you borrow from?" Before he could answer, Sarah's apartment buzzer rang. Derek froze, his face going white. The intercom crackled to life. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Detective Rodriguez with the NYPD. We need to speak with you about a financial fraud investigation." Derek grabbed Sarah's arm, his fingers digging into her skin. "Don't answer that. Please, Sarah. If you ever loved me, don't answer that." But Sarah was already walking to the intercom. "Send them up." "You have no idea what you're doing," Derek hissed. "These cops can't protect you from the people I owe money to. Only I can do that." 2 detectives arrived 5 minutes later, Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, and Patterson, a younger man with the look of someone who'd seen too much too early. They showed their badges and asked Derek to leave. "This is my apartment too," Derek protested. "Actually, sir, according to our records, the lease is in Mrs. Mitchell's name only," Rodriguez said smoothly. "You can wait in the hallway or leave the building entirely." After Derek reluctantly left, Rodriguez turned to Sarah. "Mrs. Mitchell, we're investigating reports of identity theft and loan fraud. Someone has been using your personal information to secure business loans totaling over $3 million. Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank onto her couch. 3 million, not the 2.3 Marcus had mentioned. The scope of Derek's deception was growing by the hour. "We have reason to believe your husband forged your signature on multiple documents," Patterson added, "but we need your cooperation to build a case." "What kind of cooperation?" "We'd like you to wear a wire," Rodriguez said. "Record him admitting to the forgery. With that evidence, we can arrest him and start unwinding this mess." Sarah's mind raced. A wire meant danger, meant potentially provoking Derek into violence. But it also meant justice, meant protecting her daughter from inheriting her father's criminal legacy. "There's something else," Rodriguez continued. "We've been tracking the money trail, and some of these loans came from organizations with connections to organized crime. If your husband defaults, you could be in physical danger." The room felt like it was spinning. Criminal charges, organized crime, physical threats to her unborn child. Yesterday, she'd been a pregnant woman, embarrassed at a charity gala. Today, she was apparently a target in a criminal investigation. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number with a simple message, "Thinking of you during this difficult time. Coffee later, Emules." Marcus Stone was watching, waiting, positioning himself as her savior while her world collapsed around her. Sarah realized with growing clarity that she wasn't just caught between Derek's crimes and the police investigation. She was caught in a much larger game, with players she didn't understand and stakes she was only beginning to grasp. "I'll wear the wire," she told the detectives. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Good. We'll need to move fast. Our sources suggest Derek's creditors are losing patience." As if to emphasize the point, Sarah's apartment building's fire alarm suddenly began blaring. Through her window, she could see smoke rising from the garage where her car was parked. Patterson was already on his radio calling for backup. Rodriguez drew her weapon and moved to the window. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said grimly, "I think someone just sent your husband a message about his overdue payments." The game had just escalated from financial fraud to arson, and Sarah was beginning to realize that in this war between Derek, Marcus, and forces she couldn't see, she wasn't just collateral damage. She was the prize they were fighting over. The coffee shop on 82nd Street looked innocent enough, but Sarah knew appearances could be deadly. She sat at a corner table, her hand resting protectively on her belly, the wire taped to her ribs feeling like a live snake against her skin. Detective Rodriguez had coached her for 2 hours on what to say, how to react, how to get Derek to incriminate himself without pushing him to violence. The morning's arson had destroyed 12 cars in her building's garage, including her Honda Civic. The message was clear: Derek's creditors were done waiting. The fire department found accelerant evidence, but no witnesses. Just another mysterious accident in a city full of them. Derek arrived 15 minutes late, looking haggard and desperate. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his designer shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of a sleepless night spent calculating impossible mathematics. "Thank you for coming," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "You said our baby was in danger," Sarah replied, her voice carefully neutral. "What did you mean?" Derek glanced around the coffee shop, noting the other customers, the barista, the exits. "The people I borrowed from. They're not traditional lenders. They don't just take your credit score when you default." "What people?" "Derek, you keep saying these people, but you won't tell me who they are." "Does it matter? They want their money, and they're willing to hurt my family to get it." Sarah leaned forward slightly, the way Rodriguez had taught her. "How much money are we talking about? And please don't lie to me anymore. I know about the forged loan documents." Derek's face went pale. "You know about that. The police showed me copies, my signature on loans I never signed. Derek, that's identity theft. That's fraud. I had no choice. Derek's voice rose. Then he caught himself and lowered it to a whisper. The business was failing. My investors were threatening to sue. I needed working capital fast, and banks moved too slowly. So you decided to destroy my credit and put me in debt for $3 million. It was supposed to be temporary. I was going to pay it back before you ever found out. Sarah felt a sick satisfaction as Derek continued to dig his own grave. Every word was being recorded, every admission of guilt captured for the prosecution. Where did the money go? She pressed. Expenses, payroll, some investments that didn't work out. Derek ran his hands through his hair. And some went to keeping Jessica happy. She has expensive tastes. You used stolen money to buy gifts for your mistress. It wasn't like that. She's not just my mistress. Sarah, I love her. We're getting married after the divorce. The casual cruelty of it hit Sarah like a physical blow. Derek had stolen her identity, destroyed her financial security, and put their unborn child in danger, all to fund his affair with a 26-year-old influencer. How did you even forge my signature so perfectly? She asked. Derek's expression shifted to something like pride. You sign things all the time. Sarah, grocery receipts, delivery confirmations, birthday cards. I practiced for months, studying your handwriting. The notary was a friend of mine who owed me a favor. Perfect. Rodriguez would be thrilled with that admission. And the collateral on these loans, Sarah continued. Some was business assets, but most was personal guarantees. If I default, they can come after our apartment, our savings. Anything with your name on it. Except I don't have any savings. Remember, you thought I was broke. Derek's eyes narrowed slightly. Right, of course. But they don't know that. As far as they're concerned, you're married to a successful real estate developer. They expect you to have resources. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Derek, do these people know about my pregnancy? I might have mentioned it. Why? Because pregnant women are vulnerable. We make good targets for pressure tactics. Derek's face crumpled. I never meant for this to happen. Sarah, I just needed time to fix things. But then that video went viral, and my clients started canceling contracts, and everything spiraled out of control. So this is my fault for being publicly humiliated by my own husband. No, that's not what I meant. Derek reached across the table and grabbed her hand. Listen to me, Sarah. There's a way out of this, but I need your help. Here it comes, Sarah thought. The real reason for this meeting. Marcus Stone contacted me last night. Derek continued. He's willing to buy out my debt, all of it, in exchange for a partnership in my company. Sarah's blood ran cold. Marcus hadn't mentioned knowing Derek directly. What kind of partnership? He wants 60% ownership, plus management control. It's basically a takeover, but it would keep us safe. Us, you, and the baby. He specifically mentioned protecting you. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Marcus Stone hadn't randomly appeared to help her. He'd orchestrated this entire situation, used Derek's gambling addiction and financial desperation to force a crisis that would deliver Sarah directly into his hands. There's just one problem, Derek continued. Marcus wants to meet with you directly before he finalizes the deal. He says he needs to evaluate all stakeholders. When, tonight, his penthouse on Central Park West. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. Get location and time. We'll have backup or ready. I don't know. Derek, meeting with a stranger in his apartment while I'm pregnant and vulnerable. He's not a stranger. He's a legitimate businessman with billions of dollars. And Sarah, if we don't take this deal, people are going to get hurt, starting with you and our baby." The threat was clear. Derek had become a weapon pointed at her heart, and Marcus Stone was the one pulling the trigger. "Okay," Sarah said finally. "I'll meet with him." Derek's relief was palpable. "Thank you. You're saving our lives." But as Sarah left the coffee shop, her hand unconsciously checking that the wire was still securely attached, she knew the truth was far more complicated. She wasn't saving their lives. She was walking into a trap that had been months in the making. The only question now was whether Rodriguez and the NYPD would be able to protect her when the trap finally snapped shut. Marcus Stone's penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor of a building that probably cost more than most small countries' GDP. The private elevator opened directly into his living room, a space that screamed wealth with the subtlety of a cathedral bell. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Central Park that made Sarah feel like she was floating above the city. Marcus emerged from what appeared to be a home office, wearing jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. The casual attire made him seem more approachable, which somehow made him more dangerous. "Sarah," he said warmly, as if they were old friends rather than predator and prey. "Thank you for coming. I know this situation has been overwhelming." Sarah had left the wire with Rodriguez, who'd explained that recording someone in their own home without consent was legally complicated. Instead, she wore a tiny GPS tracker disguised as a button on her coat. Backup units were stationed throughout the building and surrounding blocks. "Your husband is in serious trouble," Marcus continued, gesturing for her to sit on a leather sofa that probably cost more than her car. "But I think we can help each other." "How exactly can I help you?" Sarah asked. "According to Derek, I'm just a broke marketing coordinator with no business experience." Marcus smiled, and Sarah felt like a mouse being studied by a particularly intelligent cat. "We both know that's not true, don't we? Sarah, or should I call you the founder and former CEO of Nexus AI?" The blood drained from Sarah's face. She'd hidden that information from everyone, including Derek. "How did you—" "I make it my business to know about promising entrepreneurs, especially ones who've successfully exited their companies for significant sums." Marcus moved to a bar cart and poured himself a scotch. $53.7 million. Wasn't it quite impressive for someone who started in a dorm room? Sarah's mind raced. If Marcus knew about her money, what else did he know? Why haven't you told Derek? Because Derek is a fool who wouldn't know valuable intellectual property if it bit him on his mediocre ass. Marcus's casual profanity was somehow more threatening than shouting. He sees a pregnant wife who's become inconvenient. I see one of the most brilliant AI developers of her generation. "What do you want from me?" Marcus returned to his seat, close enough that Sarah could smell his expensive cologne. "I want you to build me the future. Sarah, artificial intelligence isn't just the next big thing, it's the only thing that matters. Companies like Google and Tesla are spending billions trying to crack problems you solved in your spare time. My AI was specialized software for financial trading. It's not revolutionary. No, your algorithm increased portfolio returns by 37% while reducing risk exposure by half. Goldman Sachs would kill for that technology." Marcus leaned forward, his intensity palpable. "But that was just your warm-up act. What could you build with unlimited resources and complete creative freedom?" Sarah felt a dangerous flutter of excitement. She'd spent 3 years since the sale working part-time consulting jobs, using a fraction of her capabilities. The idea of unlimited resources, of pushing the boundaries of what AI could accomplish, was intoxicating. "Derek mentioned you'd take over his company." she said carefully. Derek's company is worthless. I'm offering to pay his debts as a courtesy. Nothing more. What I'm really interested in is starting fresh with you. Marcus stood and walked to a wall-mounted display that showed stock prices, news feeds, and what appeared to be live surveillance footage from multiple locations. Sarah's apartment building was among them. I've been watching you for months, Sarah, ever since my analysts flagged your name in connection with Nexus AI. I wanted to understand who you really were before making contact. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting you. Do you think Derek's financial problems just happened overnight? I've been applying pressure gradually, forcing him into increasingly desperate decisions. The admission hit Sarah like a physical blow. You orchestrated this entire situation. I created an opportunity, Marcus corrected. Derek's gambling addiction and financial incompetence were always going to destroy him eventually. I simply controlled the timing and circumstances. Sarah tried to stand, but Marcus's hand on her shoulder kept her seated. The gesture was gentle but immovable. The people Derek owes money to, they're not random criminals. Marcus continued. They work for me. The forged loan documents, the identity theft, the escalating pressure. All of it was designed to separate you from your husband and put you in a position where partnership with me became your only viable option. That's manipulation. That's abuse. That's business. And it's also liberation. Marcus's voice took on a hypnotic quality. Derek never saw your potential. He wanted a pretty wife to make him look successful. I'm offering you the chance to change the world. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus glanced at it and smiled. Ah, perfect timing. Derek should be arriving any moment. What? I invited him to witness our agreement. After all, he did bring us together, in his own pathetic way. The elevator chimed, and Derek emerged looking frantic and desperate. He'd clearly run through the building's lobby, his hair disheveled and his breathing labored. Marcus, thank God. Derek gasped. I've been trying to reach you all day. My creditors are demanding payment by midnight, or they're going to... He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Sarah. What is she doing here? Saving your life, Marcus replied calmly. Sarah has agreed to join my organization. In exchange, I'll pay your debts and ensure your safety. Derek's expression shifted from relief to confusion to something approaching understanding. Wait, you knew about Sarah before tonight, didn't you? Marcus's smile was predatory. I know about everyone who interests me. Derek, including your wife's rather impressive financial portfolio. Derek turned to Sarah, his face white with shock. What financial portfolio, Sarah? What is he talking about? And in that moment, Sarah realized that Marcus Stone had just handed her the perfect weapon to destroy her husband. The truth about her hidden millions, delivered at precisely the moment when Derek was most vulnerable. She could tell him everything, watch his world collapse as he realized what he'd thrown away. But she could also use this moment to her advantage, to turn the tables on both men who thought they could manipulate her. Derek, she said quietly, there are a lot of things about me you never bothered to learn. Derek's face cycled through confusion, realization, and pure rage in the space of 3 seconds. You're rich. You've been rich this whole time, and you let me borrow money from criminals. I let you. Sarah's voice was ice cold. I had no idea you were borrowing money from anyone. You forged my signature. Remember, you committed identity theft. But if you had money, why didn't you help me? Why didn't you tell me? Sarah stood slowly, her pregnancy making the movement awkward but her dignity intact. Because I wanted someone who would love me without knowing about my bank account. I wanted to know who you really were when you thought I was broke. And now you know, Marcus interjected, clearly enjoying the drama. Derek is exactly the kind of man who abandons his pregnant wife the moment she becomes inconvenient. Derek whirled on Marcus. You son of a bitch. You knew about her money from the beginning. Didn't you? This whole thing was a setup. Of course it was, Marcus said without shame. Did you really think a man of my resources would lend money to a failing real estate developer without doing extensive background research I knew about Sarah's AI company, her sale proceeds, her investment portfolio? I also knew she was married to a gambling addict with more ambition than talent. So you destroyed my life to get to her. I presented her with an opportunity to escape a life that was beneath her intellectual capabilities, Marcus corrected. You destroyed your own life through poor choices and criminal behavior. Derek lunged toward Marcus, but two security guards materialized from hidden positions and restrained him without apparent effort. Sarah realized that Marcus had been prepared for violence, had perhaps even anticipated it. Let me go. Derek struggled against the guards. Sarah, don't trust him. He's a psychopath who manipulates people for sport. And you're a criminal who stole my identity and put our child in danger, Sarah replied. At least Marcus is honest about being terrible. Marcus laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. I do appreciate directness. Derek, you're going to disappear now. My people will relocate you somewhere safe, where the creditors you're so afraid of will never find you. What about the money I owe? Already paid. Consider it a wedding gift to Sarah, who's about to become my business partner. Derek's struggles intensified. Sarah, please, I made mistakes, but I'm still your husband. We can work this out. No, Sarah said quietly. We really can't. The security guards began escorting Derek toward the elevator. As the doors closed, he screamed something about getting revenge, about making them both pay. His voice faded as the elevator descended, leaving Sarah and Marcus alone in the vast penthouse. That was easier than expected, Marcus said, returning to his bar cart. Would you like some sparkling water? I have several varieties. Sarah realized that she was now completely at Marcus's mercy. No backup, no witnesses, no way to call for help. The GPS tracker would tell Rodriguez where she was, but not what was happening to her. What happens now? She asked. Now we discuss the future. Your future, specifically. Marcus handed her a crystal glass of water that probably cost more than most people earned in a day. I'm offering you a $50 million signing bonus, a state-of-the-art laboratory, unlimited research budget, and a team of the world's best programmers and engineers. To build an AI system that can predict and manipulate human behavior with perfect accuracy. To create technology that makes everything else obsolete. The scope of what he was proposing hit Sarah like a cold wave. That's not artificial intelligence. That's social control. It's evolution. Human decision-making is chaotic, inefficient, destructive. What if we could guide people toward better choices? What if we could eliminate war, poverty, and suffering by simply helping people make optimal decisions? And who decides what's optimal, you? Marcus smiled, and Sarah saw the true predator beneath his civilized exterior. Someone has to. Democracy is mob rule. Capitalism is barely controlled greed. Every system humanity has tried eventually collapses because people make terrible choices when left to their own devices. Sarah's daughter kicked forcefully, as if protesting Marcus's vision of the future. And if I refuse, then you'll leave here safely, return to your apartment, and raise your child as a single mother while Derek disappears into witness protection. You'll be wealthy enough to live comfortably, but you'll never reach your full potential. That doesn't sound so bad, doesn't it? What about when your daughter grows up in a world where AI technology has advanced beyond anything you can imagine, controlled by people with no moral boundaries? What happens when she has to compete for jobs against systems that can think faster, work longer, and never need sleep? The question hung in the air like a poison cloud. Sarah had always believed technology could improve the world, but Marcus was talking about replacing human agency entirely. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course, but not too much time. Technology waits for no one, and there are other brilliant minds I could recruit if necessary." Marcus walked her to the elevator, his hand resting lightly on her back. "Your daughter will be born into a world shaped by artificial intelligence. Sarah. The only question is whether you'll help determine what that world looks like, or whether you'll leave that decision to others." As the elevator descended toward the lobby, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities and fears. Outside, Rodriguez and her backup team would be waiting for a debriefing, wanting to know everything Marcus had said and done. But how could she explain that the real crime hadn't been Derek's identity theft or the loan fraud? The real crime was Marcus Stone's plan to use her brilliance to build a digital prison for all humanity. And the most terrifying part was that a small voice in her head whispered that maybe, just maybe, he was right about people needing guidance to make better choices. Maybe the world really would be better with someone like Marcus in control. Detective Rodriguez debriefed Sarah in an unmarked car parked 3 blocks from Marcus's building. The GPS tracker had worked perfectly, recording her location and movement patterns, but it couldn't capture the psychological warfare she'd just endured. "So let me understand this," Rodriguez said, reviewing her notes. "Stone orchestrated your husband's financial crisis to force you into a partnership. Derek's creditors work for Stone. The entire situation was engineered to separate you from your husband and compromise your decision-making ability." "That's correct," Sarah confirmed, "but there's more." She explained Marcus's offer, the AI research, the signing bonus that would make her one of the wealthiest women in America. Rodriguez listened with growing concern. "That's not illegal," the detective said finally. "Unethical as hell, but not criminal. Manipulation isn't a crime unless it involves fraud or coercion, and Stone was careful to frame everything as a business opportunity." "What about Derek? We have him on the identity theft and loan fraud charges. That's multiple felonies. But if Stone's people have relocated him..." Rodriguez shrugged. "It'll be harder to prosecute without a defendant." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hope you made it home safely. Offer expires at midnight. Choose wisely. He's still pressuring me," Sarah said, showing Rodriguez the message. "Classic manipulation tactic. Artificial urgency. Limited time to make a rational decision." Rodriguez studied Sarah's face. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Marcus Stone is probably the most dangerous person I've ever met. And I'm also thinking that he might be offering me the chance to do the most important work of my lifetime." "You're considering his offer?" Sarah placed both hands on her belly, feeling her daughter's movements. "I'm a single mother with a child coming in 2 months. I need to think about her future, not just my principles. And if you take his money, you'll be enabling whatever he's planning to do with this AI technology. Or I'll be in a position to influence it, to make sure it's used ethically." Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "You know what I think you're rationalizing because $50 million is a life-changing amount of money." The accusation stung because it was partially true. Sarah had been financially comfortable since selling her company, but $50 million meant never worrying about money again. It meant her daughter could attend any school, pursue any dream, live without the constraints that shaped most people's lives. Maybe I am, Sarah admitted. But I'm also thinking about the bigger picture. If Marcus builds this technology with or without me, wouldn't it be better to have someone with a conscience involved? Or you could expose his plans, go public, warn people about what he's trying to create. Who would believe me, a pregnant woman claiming that a respected billionaire is planning to control human behavior through AI? I'd sound like a conspiracy theorist. Rodriguez's radio crackled with reports of a fire in Midtown. Derek's apartment building was burning. No casualties reported, but the message was clear. Marcus's reach extended far beyond his penthouse. He's demonstrating his power, Sarah said quietly, or eliminating evidence. Rodriguez replied, either way, this guy is playing for keeps. Sarah's phone rang. Claire's name appeared on the screen. Where are you? Claire demanded. I've been calling for hours. Derek's apartment is on fire. There are rumors about criminal charges, and some financial blog is reporting that Marcus Stone is pursuing a major AI acquisition. I'm safe, Sarah said, but I need to ask you something. If you had the chance to influence the development of technology that could change the world, but you had to work with someone morally questionable to do it, what would you choose? Are we talking hypothetically, or are you about to make a decision that could ruin your life? The second one. Claire was quiet for a moment. Remember when you sold Nexus AI? You told me you felt like you were giving up your life's work for money, that you regretted not maintaining control over how the technology was used. I remember. This sounds like a chance to not make that mistake again. But Sarah, if you're considering this because you think you can change a bad person from the inside, that's not how it works. Bad people don't become good because good people work for them. They just become more effective at being bad. After hanging up with Claire, Sarah sat in the unmarked police car watching pedestrians hurry past on the sidewalk. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that their future might be decided by a conversation between a pregnant woman and a detective in an unmarked car. What's your gut telling you? Rodriguez asked. My gut is telling me that I'm about to make a decision that will define the rest of my life and my daughter's life, and I'm terrified that there's no right choice. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus, 11:30 p.m., 30 minutes to change the world. Don't disappoint me. Rodriguez checked her watch. You need to decide now. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to imagine two futures. In one, she took Marcus's money and built technology that could be used to help humanity make better decisions. In the other, she walked away and hoped someone else would make those decisions more ethically. Both futures scared her, but one future gave her agency, gave her the power to shape what came next. I'm going to take his offer, she said finally. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Then God help us all. Sarah's hands trembled as she typed her response to Marcus. I accept your offer. When do we start? The reply came instantly. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Welcome to the future. Rodriguez drove her home in silence, both women understanding that they just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The city looked different now, as if Sarah was seeing it through new eyes, calculating how many people's lives might eventually be touched by the technology she was about to help create. You know this means you'll be working undercover for us, Rodriguez said as they pulled up to Sarah's building. Unofficially, of course. We can't compel you to spy on Stone, but you're hoping I'll document whatever illegal activities I discover. Something like that. Just remember, Sarah, good intentions don't erase bad actions. If Stone crosses legal lines, we need to know about it. Sarah's apartment felt like a museum of her old life. Wedding photos with Derek smiled at her from the mantel, reminders of a marriage built on lies and manipulation. She took them down one by one, placing them in a box that would go to storage along with everything else from her previous existence. Her phone rang at exactly midnight. Marcus's voice was warm, almost paternal. "I wanted to personally welcome you to the team," he said. "I've arranged for a moving service to help you relocate to more appropriate accommodations. You'll need space for a home office, a nursery, and enhanced security." Enhanced security. "Your work will be classified. Sarah, corporate espionage is a real concern in our industry. Don't worry, the security team is very discreet." Sarah realized she was trading one form of captivity for another. Derek's financial crimes had trapped her in a marriage. Now Marcus's money would trap her in a gilded cage. "What exactly will I be working on?" she asked. "Tomorrow we'll tour the laboratory and meet your team. But broadly speaking, you'll be developing predictive algorithms that can analyze human behavior patterns and suggest optimal interventions." Interventions. Nudges, you might call them. Ways to guide people toward better choices without removing their sense of agency. For example, an algorithm that could predict when someone is likely to make a poor financial decision and suggest alternatives. It sounded reasonable, even beneficial. But Sarah heard the implications beneath Marcus's careful words. An algorithm that could predict behavior could also manipulate behavior. Technology designed to help could easily be weaponized to control. "I have one condition," Sarah said. "Oh. I want complete transparency about how my work will be used. No classified applications, no military contracts, no partnerships with organizations I haven't approved." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "That's ambitious, but I appreciate your ethical concerns. We'll discuss implementation details tomorrow." After he hung up, Sarah sat in her empty apartment feeling the weight of her decision. She just agreed to work for a man who'd orchestrated her husband's downfall and manipulated her into financial dependence. But she'd also positioned herself to influence the development of technology that could reshape human society. Her daughter kicked forcefully, as if protesting her mother's choice. "I know, baby," Sarah whispered. "I'm scared too. But maybe this is how we make sure you grow up in a better world." The next morning brought a parade of moving trucks, security installers, and interior designers. Marcus had purchased a townhouse on the Upper East Side, complete with a state-of-the-art home office and a nursery that looked like something from a luxury magazine. Sarah's new security detail consisted of two women who introduced themselves as former FBI agents specializing in corporate protection. They were polite, professional, and absolutely terrifying in their competence. The laboratory was in a nondescript building in Lower Manhattan, 60 floors of the most advanced computer equipment Sarah had ever seen. Her team consisted of 12 researchers, all brilliant, all young, all seemingly thrilled to be working on cutting-edge AI development. "This is incredible," Dr. Jennifer Kim told her during the tour. "Marcus has given us unlimited resources and complete creative freedom. We're doing research that's 10 years ahead of anything happening at Google or Microsoft." "What kind of research?" Sarah asked. "Behavioral prediction models, social network analysis, decision tree optimization. We're mapping human psychology with unprecedented precision." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the building's aggressive air conditioning. "And what happens to that data? That's above my pay grade," Jennifer replied. "Marcus handles all the practical applications. We just focus on making the technology as accurate as possible." During her first week, Sarah immersed herself in the research, trying to understand the full scope of what Marcus was building. The technology was indeed revolutionary, capable of predicting individual behavior with over 90% accuracy. It could analyze social media posts, financial transactions, and movement patterns to create detailed psychological profiles of entire populations. The applications were limitless and terrifying. On Friday afternoon, Marcus invited her to lunch at an exclusive restaurant where the waiters treated him like royalty. Over wine he didn't drink, and food he barely touched. He outlined his vision for their work. Imagine a world where suicide rates drop to zero because our algorithms identify at-risk individuals and connect them with help before they reach crisis points, he said. Imagine preventing terrorist attacks by recognizing radicalization patterns before violence occurs. That sounds wonderful, Sarah replied carefully. But who controls these systems? Who decides what behaviors to prevent and what interventions to implement? Marcus smiled, and Sarah saw the predator beneath his civilized mask. The people best qualified to make those decisions. People like us. And if we're wrong, if our idea of optimal behavior doesn't match what people actually want for their lives, then we guide them toward better wants. Marcus said simply, "Free will is overrated. Sarah, most people make terrible choices when left to their own devices. We can help them choose better." Sarah's daughter kicked violently, as if reacting to Marcus's words. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the strong, independent life growing inside her, and realized with crystal clarity that she'd made a terrible mistake. Marcus Stone wasn't trying to improve humanity. He was trying to replace human agency with algorithmic control, and she was helping him do it. "Excuse me," she said, standing abruptly. "I need some air." In the restaurant's bathroom, Sarah stared at her reflection and tried to figure out how to escape a trap of her own making. She was 7 months pregnant, financially dependent on a psychopath, and surrounded by security guards who reported her every movement. But she was also brilliant, resourceful, and carrying the future inside her belly. Time to remind Marcus Stone that he'd underestimated the wrong woman. Sarah spent the weekend planning her escape from Marcus Stone's web, but escape proved more complicated than she'd anticipated. Her new townhouse was beautiful, comfortable, and under constant surveillance. Her security detail was professional, courteous, and utterly uncompromising about her safety protocols. On Monday morning, she implemented her plan. "I need to visit my doctor," she told her security team. "Routine prenatal appointment." They drove her to Dr. Emily Carter's office, the same physician Marcus had used to fabricate medical records for Derek's custody case. But Dr. Carter had no idea that Sarah knew about her involvement in Marcus's schemes. During the appointment, Sarah played the role of concerned, expectant mother perfectly. She asked about labor preparations, discussed birth plans, and requested extra prenatal vitamins. What she actually did was plan a recording device in Dr. Carter's office and install monitoring software on her computer. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Carter assured her. "Your daughter is healthy and strong." "Just like her mother," Sarah replied, the double meaning lost on the doctor. That afternoon, Sarah began her real work, using her access to Marcus's research facility. She started documenting everything: the behavioral prediction algorithms, the social control applications, the client list that included authoritarian governments and corporations with questionable ethics. She also began modifying the code. Sarah's AI expertise wasn't just in development, she was also skilled at creating backdoors and kill switches. Over the course of 2 weeks, she embedded hidden protocols in every major system, giving herself the ability to disable Marcus's entire operation with a few keystrokes. Meanwhile, she maintained regular contact with Detective Rodriguez through encrypted messaging apps, passing along evidence of Marcus's criminal activities. The fraud charges against Derek had expanded into a broader investigation of Marcus's business practices. "We need smoking gun evidence," Rodriguez told her during a coded phone conversation. "Something that proves Stone deliberately manipulated your husband and orchestrated the financial crisis." "I'm working on it," Sarah replied, "but he's very careful about documentation." The smoking gun came from an unexpected source, Jessica Vance. Derek's former mistress had been abandoned when Marcus paid off Derek's debts and made him disappear. With no financial support and her social media career damaged by association with the scandal, Jessica had grown desperate and angry. She contacted Sarah through Instagram, requesting a private meeting, against her security team's advice. Sarah agreed to meet her at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. Jessica looked different without her Instagram filters and professional makeup. Younger, more vulnerable, and genuinely remorseful. "I need to tell you something about Derek and Marcus," Jessica said without preamble. "I recorded everything. Everything. Marcus contacted me 8 months ago, before I ever met Derek. He paid me to seduce Derek, to encourage his gambling, to push him into making riskier financial decisions." Jessica pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a banking app with regular deposits from a company called Stone Holdings. $50,000 over 6 months to destroy your marriage. Sarah stared at the evidence, feeling pieces of the puzzle click into place. "You were working for Marcus from the beginning. I thought I was just breaking up a marriage for money. I didn't know about the forged loans or the criminal charges until I saw the news." Jessica's voice broke. "I didn't know you were pregnant when this started. I didn't know Marcus was planning to force you into business partnership. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Derek wasn't the only target. Marcus has done this to other women, other couples. He identifies brilliant women trapped in bad relationships and orchestrates crises that force them to depend on him." The scope of Marcus's predatory behavior hit Sarah like a physical blow. She wasn't his first victim. She was part of a pattern. "I have recordings of conversations with Marcus, bank records, text messages coordinating the whole scheme." Jessica continued. "But I need protection. If Marcus finds out I'm talking to you—" "I can help with that," Sarah said, thinking of Detective Rodriguez. That evening, Sarah sat in her beautiful townhouse, surrounded by luxury she'd bought with blood money, and planned Marcus Stone's destruction. She had evidence of his manipulation, documentation of his illegal surveillance programs, and proof of his systematic targeting of vulnerable women. But she also had something else, the ability to turn his own technology against him. Sarah activated the kill switches she'd embedded in Marcus's systems, but not to destroy them. Instead, she reprogrammed the behavioral prediction algorithms to target Marcus himself, analyzing his patterns, predicting his responses, and feeding him false information designed to trigger increasingly erratic behavior. The psychological warfare that Marcus had perfected against others was about to be turned back on him. On Wednesday morning, Sarah called Marcus to request an urgent meeting. "I've discovered security vulnerabilities in our systems," she told him. "We need to discuss countermeasures immediately." Marcus agreed to meet her at the laboratory that afternoon. When he arrived, Sarah was waiting with a presentation that would have impressed any cybersecurity expert. She showed him fabricated evidence of hacking attempts, fictional vulnerabilities, and recommended security protocols that were actually designed to give law enforcement access to his entire network. "This is concerning," Marcus said, studying her fake evidence. "How do you recommend we proceed?" "Complete system lockdown and forensic analysis," Sarah replied. "I've already contacted federal cybersecurity experts who can help us identify the intrusion source." What she'd actually done was contact Detective Rodriguez, who had federal agents standing by to execute search warrants the moment Marcus consented to outside investigation of his systems. "Do it," Marcus said. "Whatever it takes to protect our work." Sarah smiled, feeling her daughter kick approvingly. "Consider it done." 20 minutes later, FBI agents flooded the building with warrants to seize all computer equipment and arrest Marcus Stone on charges ranging from identity theft to racketeering to conspiracy to commit fraud. As they led Marcus away in handcuffs, he looked back at Sarah with something approaching admiration. Well played, he said quietly. But this isn't over. Yes, Sarah replied, her hand resting protectively on her belly. It is. 6 weeks later, Sarah gave birth to a healthy daughter she named Clare, after the friend who'd stood by her through everything. Derek remained in witness protection, his testimony helping prosecutors build cases against Marcus's criminal network. Jessica received immunity in exchange for her cooperation and testimony. Dr. Carter lost her medical license and faced criminal charges for falsifying medical records. The technology Sarah had helped develop was placed under federal oversight, ensuring it would be used for legitimate research rather than social control. And Sarah Shee started a new company, this time focused on using AI to protect vulnerable people rather than exploit them. She called it Phoenix Technologies, because sometimes the most beautiful things rise from the ashes of destruction. On the day Marcus Stone was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, Sarah received a final message from him. You would have been magnificent as my partner. She deleted the message without responding. She had better things to do than waste time on predators. She had a daughter to raise and a world to improve, one ethical algorithm at a time. The question, who'd want a pregnant woman, had been answered definitively, someone smart enough to recognize that pregnancy doesn't diminish a woman's power. It amplifies it. If Sarah's transformation from victim to victor inspired you, smash that like button. And let me know in the comments what part shocked you most. Did you see Marcus's manipulation coming? What would you have done in Sarah's position? Share this story with someone who needs to hear that their lowest moment might just be their greatest opportunity. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories of women who refused to stay down. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.